Well, good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful Monday morning. Today is October 6th, 2025. We get together most weekday mornings at this time, 8 o'clock Central. Thank you for joining us live, or if you're listening to the recording, thank you nonetheless. Screen should be shared here, 509 South Pacific. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Few kind of housekeeping issues before we get started. If you know of anyone that's looking for funding that would like to participate in our grant program, they can access it very easily on entrepreneurstarterpack.com. If any of you are distribution partners or interested in being a distribution partner, we're setting up free landing pages now. And frankly, your landing page would look just like entrepreneurstarterpack.com. Our main website is 509pacific.org. Our tech support line is 903-347-8042. We put most of our trainings up on YouTube. When I say most, 99.9%. So you can always go back and see past trainings if you care to. If you need to schedule a one-on-one, here we go. Our background is frankly the same as we cover each morning, but just to cover it nonetheless. Our nonprofit has applied for and received a grant. There are three mandates, three things that we're supposed to be focusing on and doing, and we're accountable for that. Improving financial literacy. Let's talk about that a bit. And I guess today's training fits into that, but there's a lot of people, they don't know what you know and what I know about funding. And with that being said, that lack of knowledge can be a significant barrier in them being able to accomplish their goals of raising capital to start or grow a business to reach their potential. So, building financial literacy is a big part of what we're focused on. And those of you that are distribution partners, we encourage you to assist as well. When we talk about financial literacy, we may look at loopholes and innovative strategies, but we're never, ever, ever going to embrace anything that's illegal or inappropriate. And that may sound obvious, but you will have some folks coming to you if you're a distribution partner, and they really are willing to cross that line to get what they want. So we need to educate them and get them back within the boundaries. And we're going to conclude today's presentation by talking about an entrepreneur that went outside of the lines and has now been sentenced to prison for several years. So what we're going to teach on and do is going to be legal and ethical. The second mandate is providing free shelf corps to entrepreneurs. You can get yours on entrepreneurstarterpack.com or get it through one of our reseller or branch offices, our distribution partners. Why do we do that? Well, we obviously need a compliant business to be able to get business funding. Now, there's more than that, but that's where it starts. And we just frankly found rather than working with clients and cleaning up what they already have, it's typically easier to provide them a clean shelf corp. So we do that through the grant. And then ultimately, the end goal is to put money in their pocket, to inject capital into the hands of entrepreneurs so they're able to start and grow their business, hire employees, contribute to the tax base, and so forth. We guarantee a minimum in writing, a minimum of 100,000, but most of the projects that we do are larger. And in fact, we're currently working on a capital raise that's a $49 million capital raise. That would be the second largest we've ever done. We did 50 million once, only once, but we are working on a $49 million deal currently. So that's a little background on who we are and what we're doing. And again, we're always looking for distribution partners, which there's no cost. It's called a reseller, and you can collaborate with us to do these things and get paid for doing that. If you're interested, there's a form on 509 Pacific. Okay, with all that being said, let's dig into today's topic. So today's agenda topic is on trade lines. I commonly see witness misunderstandings or misconceptions on trade lines. And sometimes we're getting feedback from some people that want to cross the line and do illegal things with trade lines, maybe because they don't know any better or they're really aggressive. Again, won't do that, but let's talk about trade lines. So last week we had a couple really good discussions and we were talking about our renewed focus on helping clients get their DUNS number, and then secondly, building out their Dun & Bradstreet profile. If you missed either of those trainings, again, you can access those on our YouTube channel. So, why is that important? It's important because we want the business to be credible, and having a DUNS number is an initial step. Building out the profile on Dun & Bradstreet is the subsequent step, because what we need to understand is that when we apply for funding or even extensions of credit under the business, in many cases, if not nearly all the cases, the lender, the extender of credit, is going to go pull a Dun & Bradstreet report on the client's business. So no matter what you and I say, what the client says about their business, the greatest credence, the greatest credibility is going to be given to what's on that report. Well, the great news is we have great ability to influence legally and ethically what's on that report. So we start with the DUNS number and then we build out the profiles. Again, we've covered that already. What I want to do today is talk about next steps. Once that has been done, and this is free and quick and easy, so it's not a problem. And a lot of you probably have heard of this, but we need to start with that. So we need to, I guess, start with a shelf corp that has a clean foundation. Then we need to get the DUNS number and then build out the profiles. Now, when we provide the shelf corp, it's also coming with a business plan and financial projections, other things needed, of course. All right, so let's just move the ball forward then. So once we have the D&B profile built out, which again is free, pretty easy, should be done in a day or two from beginning of the process. Now we want to actually add trade lines, because in many cases, lenders will want to loan money or extend credit to businesses that have demonstrated that they are able to manage extensions of credit. They have a credit history, and we can do that very quickly. Businesses are much different than people. Businesses can create a positive track record of credit very quickly, whereas individuals as people, that takes a while. With that being said, we typically are going to focus on adding 4 trade lines. So we better go define what trade line is, right? So a lot of people have a misconception of trade line, or at least an inconsistent definition. So a trade line in this context means that the borrower, which is the business, not the business owner, the business has an extension of credit. And then when that business has an extension of credit, it's reported on their business credit report, like Dun & Bradstreet. And then as they make payments, their payment history is reflected, kind of like, what you'd have for personal credit, but we're focused on business credit because for many of these trade lines, we can get non-PG. So in other words, the business is able to stand on its own, and that's what we want to. That's the end goal. We want the business to stand on its own whenever possible. So you might ask, well, why do we want 4 trade lines? Why is it 4? Why is it not 3 or 5, 2 or 6? Well, our goal is to create a PAYDEX score. PAYDEX is the scoring mechanism used by Dun & Bradstreet, and they require a certain amount of activity to trigger a PAYDEX score. So, for example, let's say that a client gets a shelf corp, and then we get them their DUNS number for free. Usually get that, it may take 1 to 2 days just for Dun & Bradstreet to turn that around. And then we can add the content in their profile within just a few minutes. So that's all very quick. So does that make the business look credible, quote unquote? Well, it's certainly a great start, and we need to start with that. But what would make it stronger is to have at least an 80 PAYDEX score. And that only happens by adding trade lines to have payment experiences that are reporting. So even a business, if we provide a shelf corp and if they got the DUNS number and worked with us to build out the profile, but if they stop there, they would have a 0 or a non-applicable paydex score. It's just the way that Dun & Bradstreet works. So if we have one payment experience, 2 or 3, there's still no paydex score. It takes 4, so that's why we're focused on that. With that, our goal is to get at least an 80 paydex score, and the scores run from 0 to 100. We don't have to have spectacular. 80 is good enough. Once we have that, oh my goodness, that opens the floodgate. So hopefully it starts to make sense. Sometimes clients hear of our program and they're like, well, that sounds too good to be true. Well, it's nothing about it's too good to be true. We're following proven, established financial principles and assembling it in a way that any client, any entrepreneur can follow, which we call the formula for funding. Now, when we're adding these trade lines, we're going to always work with the client to determine what type of trade lines do they want. Now, sometimes clients will come to us and they'll say, well, I want some age trade lines, right? I want a trade line that's been around for a couple years. Well, think about that for a moment. So in that example, the client, the grant participant, wants a fraudulent trade line. They want something that's really not real so they can go apply for funding. So that's not too good of an idea. And again, we're going to end today's conversation here at the bottom of the agenda showing you someone that did falsify their numbers and what the ramifications. So we don't want we're not going to be adding age trade lines. Can you get age trade lines? Yes. Could you use them theoretically? Is it considered bank fraud that can be subject to imprisonment? Yes. So we're not going to go in that road. We don't need age trade lines. We don't need to do anything that's going to be illegal or unethical to be successful. So with that being said, the typical trade lines that will work, and I see Mark bringing up a point, and Mark's getting it, right? So this is about building business creditworthiness. We don't want to focus on business owner. We don't want to focus on personal credit. We don't want to focus on personal credit profiles. What we want to do is make sure that the business is strong so the business can get access to the funding that they need. And then again, once we have started this process, then we're going to start to realize we can get trade lines that have no PG, that a personal guarantee is not required. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so back to this. So if we need 4 trade lines, you might ask, well, what are the trade lines going to be? We'll work with the client to see what they want and need and prefer. But normally, this is the portfolio that we're going to recommend. And I'll explain the what and the why. So, and this is actually the order we prefer to go in. It's a formula for funding. So we like to start with a business auto trade line. So pretty much everyone in our society needs transportation. Why wouldn't we want to have it in our business name instead of our personal name? Because that way it's fully tax deductible. If we buy the right type of vehicle, then we can get a Section 179 IRS exemption for accelerated depreciation. And then that trade line posts and builds the credibility in a magnificent way. So, for example, Corinthian's on the line. We're working on Corinthian and building her business credit profile. So we'll see if she agrees. But I believe what we're doing for Corinthian is we're getting a Mercedes luxury SUV, the GLS 63. So it's right about $180,000 is the vehicle that Corinthian's looking for. So nice vehicle. She could wrap it if she wants. It shows she's successful. It creates a good positive image. We were playing Prince. You Got the Look as the intro song. So it shows that she's successful. But then since it is just over 6,000 pounds, she can work with her accountant to have that $180,000 completely written off in 2025 to offset any tax liability she would have had from her or profitable business. So we like to start with an auto trade line. Wouldn't report on personal credit, reports on business. We have a lender that is great for this. We can get pretty much any type of manufacturer. We'll provide you the links so you can learn all the dealerships that are participating. They can set it up where it would not require a PG. So this is where we like to start, and it kind of makes sense because it's about the biggest trade line that we could add very quickly. Because where else are you going to go add $180,000 trade line where it's pretty much guaranteed approval? It's a tangible asset that you can use and it reduces your tax liability. So that's where we like to start. Does it have to be a $180,000 vehicle? Of course not. Could it be pre-owned versus new? Of course. Could it be more commercial, more luxury? That's all variables, but we like to start with that. And frankly, from a lender's perspective, think about that. If you're a lender and you pulled a D&B report on a business that's applying for funding, and you see that they have, they have a good infrastructure, good. They have their DUNS number, great. Their DUNS profile is built out, and I know we've not talked much about that, but you can see more about that on last week's training. And they already have a company car. It sends signals. It optically illustrates that this company is being ran like a company. So again, we don't have to start with the auto trade line, but we do recommend it. IKEA brings up a great point. What if you have a new business that's still pre-revenue? Yeah, we would still recommend doing this. And then, of course, we can transfer the money in to cover the car notes. Okay, so that would be recommended, not required. Then the second and third trade lines that we would recommend adding are business credit cards. So that's not our whole plan. Some people see this and say, oh, this is just about credit card stacking. No, our goal is typically to get large term loans that can be used to start, to grow a business, can be used to buy real estate, to acquire other businesses, what have you. But what we're showing you is the formula for funding, how to get this business strong enough to accomplish that. So I believe that we all need business credit cards anyway, right? Because when you fly, you're going to need to pay American Airlines or Delta or United. When you put fuel in your company vehicle, you need a credit card. It just makes sense. And it helps you separate personal from business. And so we can get personal credit cards even for people that have poor personal credit. So that's the second and third of the four trade lines that we would recommend. Again, it's up to the client. And then the fourth is come back and get a business line of credit. Now, in truth, the business line of credit kind of looks a lot like a business credit card, but it's different. So, for example, we do a lot of work with Wells Fargo, and we're going to go through a list of banks here in a minute that we typically work with. But with Wells Fargo, we can get a business credit card and a line of credit. Line of credit typically would be up to about 50,000, and the business credit card typically around 20,000. So it's just, frankly, we want to create a lender relationship with the business automobile, and then that really opens us up to be able to get business credit cards and lines of credit. So this is the recommended order. Now, again, the client's the client. If they want to go in a different order, they can, but we can't guarantee it'll work if they do it their way. If they do it our way, we know it'll work. We guarantee it. All right, so trade lines we've agreed are any type of extension of credit. It's not something that you buy. No one should sell another person a trade line. Can you go buy trade lines in the marketplace? Yes. But then if you use that purchase trade line to get funding or get financing, it could be considered bank fraud. And again, we're going to wrap today's discussion with not a success story, but a warning. Don't do things that are gray. Don't do it. It's not worth it. All right, so formula for funding. Let's go to here. So you've heard us refer to it, and let's just kind of connect the dots so we all have clarity. What is the formula to have a fundable business? Well, we want to start with that shelf corp, And on entrepreneurstarterpack.com, you can get from us or go through one of our resellers or branch offices. We're going to provide that shelf corp. We're going to provide 20,000 of working capital through quick cash. It's going to include the business plan written up, ready to go. It's going to include the financials written up, ready to go. Includes collateral. So this is where we need to start. We need to start with an entity that has the infrastructure. And that's what our grant provides us. That's what we do. So then, just as we discussed above, we're going to go grab that DUNS number and build out the DUNS profile. There's no cost for either of these steps in step number 2. And that entire process can be done in just a day or two. We have a loophole legally to get the DUNS number without paying their expediting fee. So we can get the expediting for free. Normally get that within a day or two. Just populate some information in their system about the business, and bam. So we've got number 2 done. As we've been discussing, we do want to add trade lines. Now, sometimes we have clients that say, well, no, I don't want to do this step 3. I just want to go right to go get that big business loan, step 4. Well, again, we can skip, sorry, not trying to outline, I'm trying to highlight it. We can skip steps if that's what the client wants to do, but we can't guarantee success if we skip steps. If we follow the process, we know that it'll work. We guarantee that it'll work. So step 3 then would be to add those trade lines. For those of you that are resellers or distribution partners in general, this is great, right? So number 4 is delivering value to the client. They now have a company car if they're following the normal model. They have several credit cards that are real, that's in their pocket that they can use. And they also have a business line of credit. So is this an intermediate step before we go get the large funding? It's a recommended intermediate step for the reasons I've discussed. But again, we have some clients that say, no, I'm not going to do all these steps. They just want to go straight to funding, and we can try that. We can try it, but we can't guarantee that it'll work if they skip steps. All right, so let's talk about big usable trade lines. I hate to say mistakes. We'll go with that. One of the mistakes I've seen some clients fall under is they'll go like to nav.com. And I have nothing against nav, but with nav, they'll help you set up with a couple kind of starter trade lines. And there's other types of starter trade lines like Uline and Granger, where you get a little net 30 account and they report, but it's not really all that usable, and it's certainly not that large. The trade line size matters. If you remember back on our training last week, which is on YouTube, where we're talking about the DUNS and the D&B profile, well, when we run our businesses Dun & Bradstreet business credit report, it's going to show the recommended capital that a credit extension that our business qualifies for. Well, if all we have are little trade lines, we're going to have less borrowing capacity than if we had more sizable trade lines. So that's why we do it the way that we do it. So big is important, size matters, usable is important. We don't want just something that's there for the sake of showing it. But I do respect that we can get a paydex score with small, unusable trade lines, but it's much less valuable to the client. All right, so let's go ahead and scroll down. This is going to be a 2-page agenda, so that it's going to extend over, sorry. All right, so size matters with trade lines, as I mentioned. We normally don't mess around with these net 30 accounts or these types of NAV starter accounts where, again, they are trade lines. They will get you a paydex score, but as far as usability and size, they don't pan out very well. So instead, we've invested considerable time, effort, and resources to set up some preferred trade lines. Now, when we say preferred trade lines, these are, of course, those that will report on the business credit profile. Early phase businesses are eligible. So when I go through this bank list here, these are specific banks and extenders of credit that are willing to work with early stage businesses. There are others that require, let's say, at least 2 years in business. Well, we don't really want to focus on those in our model because we're typically working with businesses that are early stage. So for all of these, we have worked with underwriters and resources to build out what their qualifications are. So when we come to you or come to a client and we're making recommendations for any of these three, we're not going to just say, hey, give Arizona Financial Credit Union a call. We'll be able to do more of a personal handoff that clarifies to the client, the grant participant, okay, here's what they're going to be looking for. We believe that you meet that. If you don't feel that you do, let's discuss it. But just following our model, all participants should meet the criteria of these banks. So there's a bunch here. I don't know if you want me to read through them or not, but this is not just a listing. This is of general banks or credit unions. These are specific banks and credit unions that are willing to work with our grant participants that fit our model. So, Arizona Financial Credit Union, Associated Bank, Bank of Albuquerque, Bank of America, Bank of Oklahoma, Bank of Southern California, Bell Bank, Bremer, Byline, Chase, Citizens, Comerica, Enterprise, FCB, First National, Hanover, Intrust, PNC, Town, Truist, Umbukwa, probably mispronounced that, and US Bank. So, why do I share these with you? Well, I mean, if you want to circumvent us and go right to these, you certainly can. These are our preferred banking partners. I think the benefit of going through our model is that we're getting the business ready for approval from these banks versus just going in cold, and we know what they're looking for, their qualifications. But we want to be very transparent so you know it's real. Because remember, we're a 501c3, we're technical advisors, we're not lenders, we're not the ones loaning the money or extending credit. It's the banks and credit unions doing that. A couple more, Webster Bank and Wells Fargo. All right, so we're going to open it up for Q&A in a second, but I've told you that we were going to close the agenda at least with a real story that was in the press just a few days ago from the time of this recording. So highlighted, we will never, ever buy or sell trade lines that are not legitimate. I know there's a market for them, wouldn't recommend doing it, and maybe here's why. Using fake trade lines may result in criminal prosecution. So not just like, oh, a fine and a slap on the wrist, criminal prosecution. So here's a real unfortunate example. I didn't put her name in for privacy, but a real person, a female entrepreneur, she was just sentenced about a week ago. How long was she sentenced to prison? 85 months. Well, no one wants to go to prison at all, let alone for 85 months. And she defrauded JP Morgan Chase. She lied about the success of her startup company and she submitted fake data. So she was not a client, she is not and was not a client of ours because we're not going to do that. If we find that we have a client and they're wanting to lie to get the results they want, we can't continue that relationship. So we can be innovative, we can look for loopholes, we can be innovative and aggressive, but we can't cross that line. The bottom line is the U.S. Attorney's Office proved that she had fraudulently induced Chase Bank with inaccurate financials. So our model is always going to be based upon legal and ethical processes and solutions. We've gone through a Federal Trade Commission audit, and from that audit, we were found to have no wrongdoings, nothing that needed to change, no fines. And so you might hear, oh, you guys went through an FTC audit. That sounds sketchy. Well, no, we grew so quickly. We were getting so many clients funding, it drew the regulators' attention. But I'm fine with it because we went through that process, which was painful, and we have a fully compliant program. All right, so with that being said, let me scroll back up and let's go through the questions, comments, concerns you all have. All right, so I see some of you have some individual questions or topics, and of course, we'd recommend one-on-one for that. So let me skim through here. Carla asked, and Carla, thank you. One of your first clients just came through, and if you noticed this morning, Carla, they were just issued their trade line. I'm sorry, their shelf corp this morning with their business plan and financials that was sent to your client this morning. You were copied, so that was your first one, I believe, Carla. All right, but Carla's question is, do the trade lines belong to the shelf corp or will they fall off? No, they're real. They're real trade lines that report off of the business and they can be used. But that's consistent with all that we discussed. We're not going to game the system. Tijani asked about when are the trade lines required? What type of loans? Well, we can access SBA, USDA, ABL. There's lots of different types of funding resources. I would think in all cases it's beneficial. So my point is, regardless of where we're going to go for the large business loan, which is step four, this is the formula for funding that we recommend to follow. Again, I know that some clients don't want to follow the steps, but this is what we recommend. And this is the formula for funding, regardless of the type of funding. Troy asked about down payments for the automobile, for the business automobile. Typically, well, normally we're seeing zero down. Now, here's where the rub can hit, Troy. If you're going to buy, for instance, we have, who was getting the Escalade V? I think it was Jeff, but I'm not sure. But I think it was Jeff's getting an Escalade V for his company vehicle, meets Section 179. But those Escalade Vs are selling for about 20 to 30% above sticker. So typically, if we're going to go buy a vehicle that's selling at a premium above MSRP, don't be surprised if you have to put down payment for anything above that. But our goal would be to be able to get business vehicles without a down payment, but it's always the lender that's going to calculate that and tell us what our options are. Great question. But just keep in mind, any vehicles that are selling above MSRP probably will require a down payment equivalent. I know a couple of you were looking at the Mercedes G63s, and they tend to be about 70 to 80,000 above MSRP. So, all right, Itea asked, what is a fake trade line? Well, it's anything that's not real. So what is a real trade line? A real trade line is an extension of credit that's attached to the client's business that can be used. It's applied for, it's approved, it can be used. It's real. Fake would be something other than that, such as I've inferred, where you go out and you buy a trade line. Well, trade lines are not designed to be bought and sold. So I guess that's my best answer. Joseph asked about getting the free landing page. Yeah, so we had a recent training on that. So Joseph, if you missed that training, watch it or just simply text us and we can help you with individual questions. Chris is asking a question, what's the timeline for steps 3 and 4? Oops, 3 and 4. Well, we're looking at 2 days normally, 2 business days to take care of step number 2, because we have a legal way, a loophole to get the DUNS number expedited without having to pay the couple $100 fee that Dun & Bradstreet would normally charge. And then it's just putting some information into the DUNS profile. So I would say we can get step 2 done from beginning to end in 2 business days. As far as adding the trade lines, now that the client's going to be a greater barrier than us, if they're going to follow our standard model, we can get them with our preferred lender, identify the dealerships in their area, and go get the business automobile within 1 business day, 2 business days. Typically, what we have built with the free shelf corp and this process will be enough to qualify for the business automobile. However, the one item that often is unexpected is that in many cases they're going to ask for a business card. So we would recommend that a client bring a business card with them to the dealership. So they can go to any dealership. It's not some special dealership. Well, there are dealerships that this lender works with, but we'll provide access to the database so they can pick based upon the manufacturer they want. Business credit cards and the line of credit are all pretty quick. So this isn't a significant delay, but my goodness, it certainly is something that shows a lot of value to the client, right? Because even before the client has the large loan, now they're cruising around in their business automobile, in their purse or their wallet. They have multiple business credit cards and a line of credit that they can pull from. When you get a business line of credit, normally the bank will send you a debit card. So it kind of feels like a credit card, but you can pull from that line of credit, and then they'll also give you some checks to pull off of it. But you could also do a transfer. All right, let's see what other questions. Richard asks, is this a program to get funding for myself or helping others? It's both. It's both, Richard. And I think every business is both, right? Every business has a distribution arm and every business has a client side. We're just remarkably transparent. So we talk about both. And I think it's fine to understand the entire spectrum. So, yes, if you're looking for funding for yourself, come right here and we can get that taken care of. If you're instead or in addition to looking to help others and get paid, then you can go to 509 Pacific and fill out the inquiry form. We're just very transparent and show the entire process. Kimberly asked an interesting question. How much are the trade lines? Well, what did we say, Kimberly? We should not be buying or selling trade lines. So there is no cost for the trade lines. If they're charging you for a trade line, it doesn't smell quite right. Kenneth asked about pre-owned. Yeah. So our preferred lender, which we don't have to use our preferred lender. I've gone through our preferred lender and we've bought 2 company vehicles ourselves. So we've done all of this. We've done this. And so, not bragging, just saying we follow this formula, and I hope that you would too. If you're one of our distribution partners, you're going to have a lot more credibility if you go through it. So we have 2 business autos through our preferred lender. Now we have more than 2 business autos, but we have a Porsche 911 through the preferred lender, and we bought it new at a dealership, a Porsche dealership, out of state actually. And then we also bought a Mercedes G63. It was pre-owned because I didn't want to pay that 70 to 80,000 above sticker. And so we bought one pre-owned, I guess, luxury vehicle, and then one brand new. So we've done that. We do have multiple business credit cards. We've gone through the process, and we do have a business line of credit. So we've done it. If you're a distribution partner, I encourage you to do it so you can be a success story yourself. But do you have to? No, this is not MLM or network marketing. All right, let's see what other questions. Chris is asking about skipping the steps. So can we take a client straight from 1 and go straight to 4? We certainly can. But if we skip steps 2 and 3, it just adds some volatility. We can certainly try it and see if it works. But this is the proven formula for funding. Oscar says he already has a DUNS number, and that's great. Yeah, so if you have a DUNS number, you're off and running. Then we need to make sure that we get the profile built out, which is free and easy, and then we need to go add the trade lines, because just because you have a DUNS number and a DNB profile doesn't create a good PAYDEX score. Now, I will mention that when we talk about all of these banks that we work with, and I can continue on the second page, one requirement for all of these is that we have, the shelf corp that's in good standing and that we do have a DUNS number. They don't require prior PAYDEX score, because otherwise you'd be caught in the chicken and the egg. It's like, well, if I have to do this, to get this, then how would I get this? But none of these, to the best of my knowledge, require that strong paydex score to work with them. They do all require, the shelf corp, the business, to be set up properly, and DUNS number. All right, so Michelle says, thanks for explaining this process further. She was confused. She thought they were being purchased. No, no. We need to avoid, just like this young lady, we need to avoid doing anything that is going to fraudulently induce the lender to loan you money. So you're not going to lie, not going to cheat, not going to steal. IT asked about monthly payments. Well, when you get, if we break down these trade lines, your business auto is going to be based upon how much you're financing and how long you want to pay it back. Now, again, if you follow our recommended plan, we should be buying vehicles that meet Section 179 deductions, so that way you can get the tax benefit up front. You can finance it as long as you want, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, sometimes 7 years, but that's up to you. So, of course, depending upon how much you're financing and how long you go is going to determine your payments on that. Business credit cards, it's just based upon what you spend. Business line of credit is there, and then as you use it, you have to pay back over time what you use, but then it replenishes the line of credit. So I don't have real simple answers, but if I recall, because I think your question's about this, I think I think the 911 is around 3,000 a month, and then the G63 is about the same, but I don't remember exactly, but they're both around 3,000 a month. But it's just a function of how much you want to spend. If you don't want to spend that much, you don't. But the more you spend, A, the nicer the car you get, but B, the bigger tax break you get. But that's up to you. All right, so we've gone through a lot of information. In summary, we wanted to have a deeper trade line discussion. We want to understand what trade lines are. We should not be buying and selling trade lines. Anyone that's offering you an aged trade line, I would be very, very cautious. Otherwise, you might be having breakfast tomorrow with people that have done other things to fraudulently induce lenders. Should not do anything illegal or unethical, but there are loopholes, there's strategies, there is a formula for funding that we can follow, if I can highlight it, that does work, and we can guarantee that it works. All right, thanks everyone. You have our contact information. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Bye-bye.